In the previous video, I showed you how to apply ASP.NET MVC's output cache attribute to your controller actions in order to cache the full page output that they generate. Since dynamically generated content pages tend to change quite frequently, sometimes with every single request, it's often difficult to optimize them using full page output caching. However, even though much of the page changes, there's often much of the page that doesn't. For example, the site's primary navigation, footer contents, etc. By choosing the parts of the dynamic page that don't change much and caching them, you may still be able to take advantage of caching even in very dynamic pages. This practice is known as donut hole caching, and in this video, I'll show you how to implement this technique using the features that ASP.NET MVC provides. The donut hole caching technique is best applied to sections of the site that both appear the same on many pages and are relatively expensive to generate or render. The most common example of this is a dynamic navigation structure, such as one that is driven off of values in a database. The primary navigation in our demo application currently consists of simple markup. Though we could cache this markup, it would probably be more trouble than it was worth. What if, however, this navigation consisted of a list of auction categories that were currently in the database? For instance, what if we added the following logic to our controller actions to retrieve the categories? And then, what if we replace the current primary navigation starting at line 21 on the underscore layout file with this markup? Here, I'm iterating through the list of categories. Then I'm adding a link to the index action on the auctions controller for each of those categories. And I'm passing in the category name as a parameter. Now, when we run the site and visit the home page, we can see our list of categories is our new primary navigation. This may make for a better user experience, but we clearly don't want to make this database call every single time a page is requested. What's more, we also don't want to have to repeat this code to populate the categories list in every single controller action. In order to solve both of these problems, we can use an ASP.NET MVC feature called Child Actions. As their name implies, child actions are controller actions that are only meant to be called during the execution of other controller actions. Other than the fact that they are never meant for public consumption, child actions act just like regular controller actions, which also means that their output can be cached. The first step in creating a child action is to create a normal controller action. Though ASP.NET MVC does offer the child action only attribute to specifically avoid the action being exposed to users, this is not technically required. The real magic of child actions comes from the HTML.action helper that you can use in your views. You use this helper to tell ASP.NET MVC to execute a given controller action and render the results of that action at a particular place within your view. With this in mind, let's create a new child action that can hold our category navigation logic. To do this, we'll first create a new controller action and call it category navigation. Then, we'll cut the logic that retrieves the categories from the database and paste it into this new controller action. Next, we'll have the controller action return a partial view. Then, we'll ask Visual Studio to create that view for us. When the view is created, cut the navigation markup that we created earlier from the main layout and move it into our new view. Finally, tell the HTML.action helper to render our new category navigation action in the main layout at the same location where the navigation used to be. Here, I'm telling the HTML.action helper to render the category navigation action in the home controller. With this in place, you can execute the page to see that our new category navigation is still displayed. Even better, it now displays for every controller action in the site. But as I mentioned earlier, the downside to this approach is that it's executing that database call and rendering the same partial view HTML for every single request of the website, even though that HTML rarely ever changes. Luckily, I showed you in the previous video how to optimize controller actions that produce HTML that rarely changes. Cache them with the output cache attribute. So, go ahead and decorate our new category navigation action with the output cache attribute and give it a pretty long duration since the values will rarely change. let's say 1 hour or 3,600 seconds. While we can't use the timestamp trick here to prove that the cache is working, we can set a debug point on our controller action and execute the site in debug mode. When the site loads up, our breakpoint should get hit one time as it executes and caches its result. But as we navigate around the site, the breakpoint should not get hit again for at least another hour. In this video, I showed you how to combine ASP.NET MVC's child actions and the output cache attribute to cache sections of your dynamic pages. In the next video, however, I'm going to move my focus away from caching and look instead at taking advantage of .NET's powerful threading model to run controller actions as asynchronous operations.